What are the top 5 things that someone could do within their power to prevent cancer? And we can talk about people if they had an unlimited supply of resources versus those who maybe don't.
I'll say this from something that everybody can do. And of course, this comes with educating ourselves too. So actually, I wrote a newsletter on this. So when people sign up for my newsletter, it's the first thing they receive is my top 5 cancer risk reduction tips. The first thing that I would say is consistent and safe exercise. Doing whatever it is that you want to do for the entirety of your life, adapting whatever exercise you like to do over time as you get older. Just being consistent about it. Doesn't matter what it is. Do it safely. Try to reduce prevalence of injury where you can. Consistent exercise can't get any more important than that in terms of cancer risk reduction. But that'll also reduce a variety of different disease risks, let alone cancer. That's super important. Another one is sleep health. There's really strong causative data now to show that dysregulated sleep can be carcinogenic in a way. By destabilizing a lot of the metabolism that governs how our organs work together to metabolize foods and our response to light and those sorts of things. And this is circadian biology. So if we chronically are poorly sleeping, it can significantly increase our risks for cancer. So adopting healthy sleep behaviors is incredibly important. So like going to sleep with comfortable bedding, ensuring that the room is as dark as possible, going to bed at an appropriate time frame in accordance to human physiology, trying to get 7 to 8 hours at actual night and not, unfortunately, like shift workers, as an example. Shift workers don't always have that privilege, but, trying to sleep in accordance to human physiology, those sorts of things, just, ensuring you're comfortable while you sleep. Another one is practicing sun safety. Sunlight, of course, is very important from a circadian biology perspective, but sunlight is many different spectrums of photons and sometimes radiation. So radiation and photons are kind of the same thing. People often don't get that difference, but as a part of sunlight, you have ultraviolet radiation. Now, while it's not non-ionizing and while it can't maybe damage you as much as X-ray radiation or gamma radiation or maybe even like alpha particle decay if you want to get really fancy. Practicing sun safety from ultraviolet B rays by wearing sunscreen. If I'm somebody who works outside often, wearing sunscreen can be incredibly important. If you don't want to wear sunscreen, you can wear appropriate SPF-related clothing, but in general, sunscreens are pretty safe. But it's always, these contexts about how to use these things and not over-applying them to, use them the way that they're intended to be safe. Minimizing smoke and alcohol consumption. Obviously, smoking is a carcinogen, the same as alcohol consumption is a carcinogen. Now, people get a little bit triggered when I say minimize because I don't believe in the cold turkey approach from a human behavior perspective. I would love it in the world if nobody smoked or drank because it would be great for everybody in the long run. However, as somebody who is a human being on this planet Earth, I also enjoy the occasional alcoholic drink. And I'm not going to lie to you, I've smoked the occasional cigarette or marijuana occasionally. I don't currently do those things, but I still drink the occasional drink now and again. But they are carcinogens, so minimizing the exposure to those things as much as possible is going to have positive health effects. And if you can not do them at all, great. But some people, like myself, like the occasional drink. And of course, overconsumption of those things comes with significantly increased risks. That is a fact. Consuming a nutrient-rich and diverse profile is what I often tell people as well. So this is, again, in accordance to human physiology, consuming a diet that has a lot of diverse types of vegetables and a lot of diverse types of protein sources. A lot of people get so fixated on, I need more protein, but they assume that, meat is a really good source of protein, and it is a really good source of protein, but you can also get protein from plants. Instead of fixating on protein in a person's diet, both plant and animal sources of protein have so much more than just protein that have really good things for our health, and consuming one food group versus the other, whether it's meat or plant-based products, can come with negative side effects. So we really need to consume a diverse and nutrient-rich profile so we can get the fiber and the vitamins and the minerals that come from plants and the different types of fats and different types of proteins and things that comes from meats. Again, diverse types of meats, like omega-3s are prominent in salmon and those sorts of things. Beef has good source of iron for our health, a lot more than plants in many cases, and in some cases, in many more bioavailable. Those are the things that can help a person be healthy regarding their diet. The way that I like to talk about our immune system is that our skeletal muscle is mechanistically linked to how our immune system works. So the way that our heart pumps our blood through our bodies, our lymphatic system doesn't have a heart to pump the fluid throughout our bodies, and our lymphatic system contains our immune cells. And so our skeletal muscle contractions drive that. Now, even not exercising, our skeletal muscles contracting will drive lymphatic fluid movement. But obviously, the more I exercise, the more I maintain a healthy exercise program, the greater lymphatic fluid movement I'll have, and the increased likelihood I'll have for my immune system to function healthy for my body. So that's how the immune system is intrinsically linked to healthy skeletal muscle function. So that's why it's really important for people to exercise just from an immune cell perspective. But there's immune independent mechanisms about how exercise can secrete these proteins from muscle tissue to enable our organs to work together in harmony. So this is called myokines. So when we exercise, our muscles secrete myokines, and they go throughout our blood. They interact with, liver cells and kidney, and they kind of tell everything to work together. So that way we respond from an energetics perspective to shuttle glucose and fats throughout our bodies, and they can go to tissues as need be. And exercise helps to stimulate that as well from a metabolic perspective.
Great. In terms of nutrition, I think you mentioned some great points that people often get very nervous about. One is, like, a lot of people are taking on the carnivore diet, which means that they are not having any fiber in their diet really at all. And so I, as a physician practicing clinician, know that there are strong links with fiber consumption and reduction of colorectal cancer, and certainly a lot of benefits from cruciferous vegetables, from vegetables in general, right? Getting flavonoids and other antioxidants that can be beneficial for a variety of things. What is the pushback against vegetables and fiber?
I honestly, I don't know. I think there's this level of extremism that I'll never understand on social media, just because, and this isn't a jab at anybody in particular, but I think way too much, and I try and bolster my audience to think more critically about these problems, because if we live in extremist camps, it becomes very easy. But with these extreme behavioral tendencies, you can have problems. With vegans and vegetarians and carnivores, they often live in these extremist camps and try and ignore things like fiber in their diet from a carnivore perspective. And it's just not in support of the evidence that we have at our disposal. So it's a real problem, because then we see, people who have overall increased consumption of red meats in their diet relative to plants. So like somebody who consumes primarily red meat in their diet and zero plants, if any, they'll have severe health issues, not even just from a fiber perspective, but just because they're not getting a lot of the vitamins and minerals that come with plants and those sorts of things. I wish I knew why people attached to these camps, and I guess I'm kind of happy that I don't. But again, people don't like to consider how complex these things are. They would just rather be told carnivore diet's the best, veganism's the best, vegetarian's the best. But more often than not, it's somewhere in the middle, and it's often dependent on a person's lifestyle too. There are many cultures, as you might be familiar, that are primarily carnivore or primarily vegetarian. And there's trade-offs that come with those decisions. But, sometimes there are societal limitations as to what diets people can do. But, we live in the United States, which is, a pretty well-developed country. I'd like to think a lot of people have access to, diverse food sources independent of, the amount of ultra-processed foods in their environment. They can still, if educated appropriately, consume a nutrient-rich diet, even if that means consuming ultra-processed foods. So that, like you mentioned with my video too, it's like people love to live in these camps where they just demonize cereals and dyes like Red 40, but realistically, someone shouldn't be eating so much of those cereals in their diet that it's going to cause them severe health problems. But they can be incorporated and often enjoyed into a person's diet. They just shouldn't be sought after for nutritional reasons.
Absolutely. There's a lot of fear around sugar and cancer, that sugar feeds cancer cells and fasting on the converse, cures cancer cells or starves them of their nutrients to then make them shrink. Let's talk about that.
This is one of those issues in my field that I'll never be able to escape, no matter how much it frustrates me. Because the truth of the matter is that glucose does fuel cancer cells, but so too does it fuel a majority of the other cells in your body and organs and tissues. It's just the way that cancer cells utilize glucose is different metabolically, largely. So trying to give people the appropriate nuance as to how they're utilizing glucose differently than normal healthy cells and how that creates problems in the case of cancer is a very challenging and complex thing to discuss that most do not want to sit down and spend the time to understand, although I try. And I do my best to try and keep it simple for people. But the truth of the matter is that it's not simple. These are complex metabolic and biochemical pathways within our cells, depending on where they are in our body, that compete for not only glucose, but other sources of fuel like amino acids. And we even see cancer cells utilize amino acids as materials to enter into different biochemical pathways. But that doesn't mean that all cancer cells all the time utilize glucose either. So there's a lot of adaptations that happen within cancers, and especially as they're developing. If you starve them of glucose, they can adopt different ways to use different fuel sources. I think people fail to realize often that life is very adaptive, and cancer cells at some point had all the materials that a normal healthy cell had, but they just kind of became so messed up that now they kind of evolved into something different within you. And so it's a little bit more of a parasitic relationship than it is, you fighting you anymore. And it's, like I said, it's very complicated. So there's a lot of ongoing clinical trials to investigate how starving and various diets like fasting and ketogenic diets can be helpful for cancer patients. But without understanding the consequences and the context of these situations, we can't know how to implement these dietary strategies safely for cancer patients. So while they might help reduce a person's cancer, we have to understand all the ways that it can help somebody, identifying that it has more pros than it does cons. And right now, there just isn't enough information. So anyone that wants to claim that ketogenic diets and fasting are curative for cancer is simply lying.
Do you think there's value in terms of prevention with fasting? You hear about people doing 5-day fasting mimicking diets or 5-day or prolonged fasts, like once a quarter or whatever, once a year. Is there any value to that in the literature?
A lot of it comes from, and Lane Norton, my friend, he speaks about this quite often regarding caloric intake. So if somebody really is trying to lose weight, as an example, obviously obesity is linked to 13 different cancer types at this point that we know of, which, is obviously too many. If somebody is obese and they're trying to lose weight and they really latch on to these fasting diets and they're able to lose weight through those, the pros outweigh the cons. But again, there are unhealthy ways to go about doing these fasting and ketogenic diets and stuff. Oftentimes, they're not easy to maintain. So they can be good in the short term for weight loss, but overall, in the long term, they're not great for good human health outcomes. It doesn't mean that somebody can't do it. And I'm sure somebody will argue with me if you show this clip claiming that I'm an idiot or something. I don't know anything about nutrition or whatever, but these diets, they can be helpful. But again, without understanding the context, it's just a diet. So they can be helpful for people to reduce weight, but that's pretty much it.
But not cancer prevention.
In doing so, that can help reduce someone's cancer risks if it's directly linked to obesity, but intrinsically, no, they're not going to be directly reducing cancer rates.
Yeah, because you'll hear people say things like, "Oh, I fasted; it killed all these precancerous cells in my body because I fasted." And,
yeah, it's absurd.
So, yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
the thing here that people need to realize too is that cancer isn't just one disease, right? So if I do this diet and there's research to show that like fasting diets reduce colorectal cancer risks, right? I don't know if that's true, so don't quote me on that because it's, again, not my full area of research. But let's say there's a study that says fasting mimicking diets reduce prevalence of colorectal cancer. But what about all the other cancers, right? So there could be positive relationships between how fasting can be related to other types of cancers and simultaneously reduce colorectal cancer risk.
If you like this clip from the Rena Malik MD podcast with Dr. Joseph Zundell, make sure you check out the full video right here.